You left work at 5:30. You remember that part clearly, the clock on your computer screen. The fluorescent lights clicking off as you walked down the hallway, the weight of your bag on your shoulder. You got in your car, turned the key, felt the engine rumble to life beneath you, and then nothing. A blank. A void where memory should be. The next thing you know, you're sitting in your driveway, engine off, keys in your hand, staring at your house like you've never seen it before. 35 minutes have passed. 35 minutes of your life, gone. Not forgotten in the usual way, where details fade, but the shape of experience remains. Gone completely, as if those minutes never belonged to you at all. You drove 15 miles through traffic, navigated turns, stopped at red lights, avoided pedestrians, made 1,000 micro decisions that kept you and everyone around you alive. And you remember none of it. You tell yourself it's normal. Everyone zones out on familiar routes. It's called highway hypnosis, autopilot mode, whatever term makes it feel less disturbing. But here, that's the question that lodges in your mind like a splinter you can't remove. If you do remember being conscious during those 35 minutes, were you actually conscious at all? Or did something else, some other process, some shadow version of you take over while the real you disappeared into the void? And if that's true, where did you go? What were you during that missing time? Were you still you? Now think bigger. Think about your whole day. Try to account for it, hour by hour. You woke up, you remember that. Breakfast, probably, though the details blur. You got to work, sat at your desk, did something. Tasks, emails, meetings, maybe. But when you try to reconstruct those hours in detail, to play them back like a recording, they dissolve into a haze of vague impressions. What did you actually do between 9 and noon? You know you were there, functioning, responding, making decisions. But when you reach for the memory, there's nothing solid to grasp. Just a sense that time passed, that you existed in it, but didn't fully inhabit it. Like watching a movie where half the scenes are missing and you left to infer the plot from the fragments that remain. How much of your life have you spent this way? Not asleep, not unconscious in any medical sense, but absent. Present in body but missing in experience. Moving through the world like a ghost operating a machine while your awareness drifts somewhere else. Somewhere you can't name or recall. Hours slip past this way. Days. Weeks compound into months where you struggle to remember anything specific. Anything that felt real and immediate and fully yours. You've been alive, technically, but were you conscious? Were you actually there, experiencing the passage of time? Or did you spend those hours in some twilight state where the lights are on but nobody's home? Scientists have a name for this, though the name doesn't make it less unsettling. They call it dissociation, or more specifically, the default mode network, a state where your brain continues to operate, to process information, and execute routines, but your conscious awareness disengages, retreating into a background hum of semi-consciousness. Your brain, it turns out, is extraordinarily good at running on autopilot. It can navigate complex environments, respond to social cues, perform intricate tasks, all while the part of you that narrates experience, that creates the sense of I am here now, doing this, switches off. Not entirely off, perhaps, but dim to the point where memory formation stops. Where the narrative thread of your life skips like a scratched record, leaving gaps you'll never recover. This isn't rare. This isn't pathological. This is happening to you right now, more often than you realize. Studies estimate that people spend up to 47% of their waking hours in a state of mind wandering, where attention drifts away from the present moment and conscious experience becomes diffuse, fragmented, barely encoded into memory. 47%. That means nearly half your life is spent in a state where you're not fully present, not fully conscious in the way you assume you are. You think you're living every moment of your existence, but the data suggests something far more disturbing. You're only intermittently aware of your own life flickering in and out of full consciousness like a light bulb on a failing circuit. Consider your commute again, but this time with a darker lens. During those 35 minutes of missing time, your brain was active. Your sensory systems were functional. Your eyes saw the road, the cars, the traffic lights. Your hands gripped the wheel, made corrections, responded to hazards. Information flowed in, decisions flowed out, and the machine of your body operated with precision. But you, the conscious observer, the narrator who says, I did this, were nowhere to be found. So who was driving? Not you. not in any meaningful sense. Something drove your body home, used your hands and eyes and reflexes, but it wasn't the part of you that experiences being you. It was an unconscious subroutine, a biological algorithm executing commands without awareness, without intention, without the presence of the self you believe yourself to be. And here's the part that should terrify you: you can't tell the difference. When you snapped back into awareness in your driveway, there was no signal, no alert, no sense that something had been wrong. The transition from unconscious autopilot to conscious presence was seamless, invisible. You didn't notice you'd been gone because the machinery kept running without you. Your brain covered the gap, filled the void with a vague sense of continuity, and you accepted it without question. How many times has this happened without you even realizing you'd lost time? How many hours, days, years have vanished into that gap while you remained blissfully unaware that you were absent from your own life? This phenomenon extends beyond driving. You sit down to check your phone, intending to spend 5 minutes scrolling through messages. You blink, refocus, and suddenly 90 minutes have evaporated. 90 minutes of staring at a screen, absorbing content, reacting, tapping, swiping. But when you try to recall what you saw, what you read, what held your attention for an hour and a half, there's almost nothing there. A few vague impressions, maybe a meme or headline that lodged itself briefly before dissolving. The rest? Gone. Not forgotten in the sense of being difficult to retrieve, but never encoded in the first place. You spent 90 minutes performing the actions of consciousness, without actually being conscious. Your body sat there, your eyes moved, your fingers tapped, but you, the aware, experiencing self, were offline. Or consider work. You finish a project, submit a report, complete a task that required hours of focus and decision-making. But when you look back at what you did, trying to reconstruct the process, it feels strangely distant, like you're reading about someone else's work. You know you did it, the evidence is there, the completed file, the sent email, but the experience of doing it has dissolved. It's as if the task was performed by an automated system that borrowed your skills and knowledge, but didn't involve you, the conscious witness. You were there, technically, but you weren't present. The hours passed, the work got done, and you missed your own life while it happened. Neuroscientists explain this through the mechanics of memory encoding. Your brain doesn't record everything. It can't. There's too much information flooding in every second, too many sensory inputs, too many background processes. So it filters, selects, prioritizes. Only experiences that meet certain criteria: novelty, emotional significance, conscious attention, get encoded into long-term memory. Everything else gets discarded, lost to the void of unrecorded time. When you're on autopilot, when your attention drifts, when you're operating in default mode, your brain stops encoding. The experience happens, but the memory doesn't form. And without memory, there's no subjective sense that you were present. From your perspective, looking back, that time simply didn't exist. You lived through it, but you weren't there. Think about the implications. If consciousness requires memory and memory requires attention, then all those hours spent in autopilot, in distraction, in the diffuse haze of mind-wandering, are effectively erased from your existence. They happened in objective time, yes, but in subjective time, the only time that matters for the experience of being alive, they vanish. Your life, the felt duration of your consciousness, is far shorter than the number of years you've been breathing. Huge chunks of it are missing, deleted, as if you blinked out of existence and returned without knowing you'd been gone. You think you're living 80 years, but maybe you're only truly conscious, truly present, for 40, or 30, or less. And the question becomes unavoidable. What are you during those missing hours? If your brain continues to function, to react, to navigate the world, but the conscious self is absent, then what's operating the machinery? Is it still you in some reduced form? Or is it something else entirely, a subconscious process that mimics you so convincingly that even you can't tell the difference when it hands control back? You've always assumed that consciousness is continuous, that from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep, you are present, witnessing, inhabiting your life. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Consciousness flickers, it fades in and out. And during the gaps, something else takes over, something that looks like you, acts like you, but isn't you in any way you'd recognize. So here you are, reading these words, convinced that you're fully present, fully conscious, fully aware of this exact moment, but are you? Or is this too another gap, another stretch of autopilot that will dissolve into the void the moment your attention shifts? How much of this will you remember tomorrow? How much of today will survive the night? And when you look back on your life, trying to sum up what you've experienced, what you've truly lived, how much will be there? How many hours can you actually account for? The answer, when you face it honestly, is terrifying. Because the truth about missing time isn't that it happens occasionally during long drives or mindless phone scrolling. The truth is that it's happening constantly, invisibly, stealing your life in increments too small to notice until you look back and realize how little remains. You think you're living every moment, but you're not. You're flickering in and out of existence, and the gaps are growing. And the worst part? You won't even notice when you're gone. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain during those missing hours, and why the explanation is somehow more disturbing than the mystery. Because once you understand the mechanics, once you see how easily your consciousness can be switched off while your body continues to function, you'll start to question every moment you think you're fully present. You'll wonder if you've ever been as awake as you believe you are. Your brain, at any given moment, is running two fundamentally different modes of operation. Neuroscientists call them the task-positive network and the default mode network, but you can think of them as the spotlight and the screensaver. The task-positive network is what activates when you're focused, engaged, directing your attention toward a specific goal. Reading a challenging book, having a deep conversation, solving a problem, learning something new. These activities light up the spotlight, bringing conscious awareness into sharp, vivid focus. This is the mode where you feel present, where memory forms, where you're genuinely experiencing your life in real time. This is what you think consciousness is. But the task-positive network is expensive. It requires energy, effort, sustained mental resources. Your brain can't keep it running indefinitely, and more importantly, it doesn't want to. Because the vast majority of what you do in a day doesn't require focused attention. Brushing your teeth, walking down familiar hallways, driving routes you've taken 1,000 times, scrolling through content that doesn't engage you deeply, these activities don't need the spotlight. They can be handled by the screensaver, the default mode network, which operates on a fraction of the energy and handles routine, predictable tasks with eerie efficiency. And here's the problem. When the default mode network takes over, conscious awareness dims. Memory encoding stops. The subjective sense of being present fades to almost nothing. You're still functional, still responsive, still operating in the world, but you're not really there. The default mode network isn't just idling, it's actively doing something. Though what it's doing is so strange that scientists are still arguing about it. When your brain shifts into default mode, it stops processing the external world in detail and turns inward, generating a kind of mental static made of memories, future simulations, self-referential thoughts, and abstract associations. You start daydreaming, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, worrying about things that haven't happened. Your attention detaches from the present and drifts into a fog of internal narrative that has almost nothing to do with what's actually happening around you. And during this time, your brain continues to operate your body, to steer the car, to nod at the right moments in conversations, to perform all the physical and social routines you've automated. But you, the conscious observer, are somewhere else. Or maybe nowhere at all. This is highway hypnosis in its purest form. You've driven this route so many times that your brain has mapped every turn, every landmark, every decision point. It doesn't need your conscious input anymore. So it switches you off, lets the autopilot handle navigation, and frees up processing power for the default mode network's endless internal churning. From the outside, you look awake, alert, responsive. Your eyes track the road, your hands adjust the wheel, your foot modulates pressure on the pedals with precision. But inside? You're gone. The conscious self, the part that says, I am here, doing this, has vacated the premises. And when you snap back into awareness 35 minutes later, sitting in your driveway with no memory of the journey, it's because there was no one there to form the memory. The autopilot drove you home and you missed the entire trip. Now here's where it gets darker. The transition between task-positive and default mode isn't something you control. It happens automatically, triggered by factors you barely understand: fatigue, routine, lack of novelty, emotional states, even blood sugar levels. Your brain is constantly making calculations about whether a given moment requires conscious attention, and most of the time it decides it doesn't, so it switches you off. Not entirely, not all at once, but gradually, imperceptibly, until you re-operating in a reduced state where subjective experience fades to a whisper and memory formation ceases. You think you're in control of your awareness, that you decide when to pay attention and when to let your mind wander. But you're not. Your brain is making those decisions for you, and it's far more willing to put you on autopilot than you'd ever choose consciously. Research on mind wandering reveals just how pervasive this is. Studies where people are randomly prompted throughout the day to report what they rethinking show that nearly half the time, their thoughts have drifted away from whatever they're doing. They're physically present, working, eating, talking, driving, but mentally absent, lost in a tangle of unrelated thoughts, memories, and simulations. And crucially, they don't realize it until prompted. The drift into mind wandering is so seamless, so automatic that it happens without any conscious awareness of the transition. You don't decide to stop paying attention. You just do, and then you're gone and you don't even know you've left. But here's the truly unsettling part. During these periods of autopilot and mind wandering, your behavior doesn't change. You continue to act appropriately, to respond to social cues, to make decisions that align with your goals and values. If someone speaks to you, you answer. If a problem arises, you solve it. Your performance on routine tasks remains stable. Sometimes even improves when conscious attention isn't interfering with well-practiced skills. From an external perspective, there's no indication that anything is wrong, that you're anything less than fully conscious. The only difference is internal, you're not experiencing it. The lights are on, the machinery is running, but nobody's home. You're a biological robot executing pre-programmed routines, and the person you think of as you has temporarily ceased to exist. This raises a philosophical question that should haunt you. If you can function perfectly well without conscious awareness, what is consciousness actually for? Why does it exist at all if so much of your life can be successfully navigated without it? Evolutionary biologists have puzzled over this. Consciousness is metabolically expensive, requiring significant neural resources. If the brain can handle most tasks through unconscious processing, and it clearly can, given how much of your life you spend on autopilot, then why maintain consciousness at all? One theory suggests that consciousness exists specifically for handling novelty, for dealing with situations that don't fit established patterns and require flexible, creative problem solving. But if that's true, then consciousness is only necessary during the rare moments when something unexpected happens. The rest of the time, the bulk of your existence, it's optional, unnecessary. A luxury your brain can't always afford and often chooses to disable. Think about what this means for your sense of self. You believe you're a continuous, coherent entity, a unified consciousness that persists from moment to moment, day to day, year to year. But what if you're not? What if you actually a discontinuous process that flickers on during moments of novelty or challenge and switches off during routine? What if the you that exists right now reading these words is not the same you that will exist 5 minutes from now when your attention drifts and autopilot takes over? What if there is no continuous self at all, just a series of brief conscious episodes separated by vast stretches of unconscious functioning, with your brain stitching together the fragments into a false narrative of continuity? Memory is the key to this illusion. Your sense of being a continuous self depends entirely on memory, the ability to recall past experiences and project them forward, into a coherent life story. But if memory only forms during moments of conscious attention, and conscious attention is active less than half the time, then the story you're telling yourself is missing most of its chapters. You're creating a narrative of your life based on fragments, highlights, the rare moments when you were fully present. You think you've lived 30, 40, 50 years. But how much of that time can you actually remember? How much of it did you truly experience? Try this exercise right now. Think back to last Tuesday. What did you do? Not in general terms specifically. Hour by hour. Can you account for the time? You probably remember a few key events, maybe a meeting, a conversation, something unusual that broke the routine. But what about the gaps between those events? What did you do from 10 to 11, from 2 to 4? The hours dissolve into haze. You know you existed, that you were doing something, but the specifics are gone. And if you can't remember them, if there's no subjective experience associated with those hours, then in what sense did you actually live them? They happened to your body, yes, but did they happen to you? Now extend that backward. Think about last month. Last year, 5 years ago. The further back you go, the more your life compresses into a handful of memories separated by enormous voids. Birthdays, holidays, major life events, these stand out because they engaged your attention, activated the task-positive network, forced you into presence. But what about the ordinary days? The thousands of hours spent in routine, in transit, in passive consumption, in mind-wandering, they're gone. Not forgotten, because forgetting implies they were once remembered. They were never encoded in the first place. You spent that time in a reduced state of consciousness, and your brain decided it wasn't worth recording. From your subjective perspective, looking back, those hours might as well have never happened. You were unconscious in a very real sense, but you didn't even know it. This is why time seems to accelerate as you age. It's not that time itself moves faster, it's that you're encoding less of it. When you're young, everything is novel. Every experience engages attention, activates the task-positive network, gets recorded into memory. A summer feels like an eternity because every day is rich with new experiences, densely packed with moments you'll remember. But as you age, as life becomes routine, as you fall into predictable patterns, the default mode network takes over more and more. You spend increasing amounts of time on autopilot and memory formation drops. Months pass in what feels like days because you weren't present for most of them. You were absent, operating in screensaver mode, and your brain didn't bother to save the file. Subjectively from the inside, those months never happened. And this acceleration continues year after year until you look back at decades and find almost nothing there. The implications are staggering. If consciousness is intermittent, if you're only truly present for a fraction of your life, then what you call your life is actually a highlight reel with most of the footage missing. The continuous narrative you construct, the sense that you've been you all along, is a fiction your brain maintains by papering over the gaps with vague impressions and false continuity. You're not living a full, rich, present existence. You're flickering in and out like a malfunctioning signal, and the void between flickers is growing. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you reclaim the missing time? The answer is both simple and impossibly difficult. You have to force yourself into presence. You have to actively resist the brain's tendency to switch into autopilot. You have to seek novelty, engage attention, break routines, do things that require conscious effort. Because the only hours you will ever truly live are the ones where you reawake enough to notice them, engaged enough to remember them. Everything else is lost time, missing time, hours that vanish the moment they pass. And right now, as you read this, your attention is already drifting. The default mode is creeping back in. And soon, very soon, you'll be gone again. The question is, will you notice when you disappear? Or will you slip away into the void like always, unaware that you've lost another hour, another day, another piece of your life you'll never get back? The clock is ticking. And you're not even watching it.